Claire Bennett, a biologist tired of men who couldn't spark her fire, left the city behind for the wild Congo, chasing secrets, craving something raw. Sick of shallow promises and weak connections, she hungered for more. Then, under a moonlit night, it found her. A gorilla, fierce and untamed, its eyes igniting her in ways no man ever could. In a heartbeat, their worlds crashed, a rush of heat, a shadowed dance that set her free. This is the jungle secret. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, let's dive in. Claire Bennett, a 30-year-old American biologist, stepped off the rickety plane onto the damp soil of the Republic of Congo. Her mission was clear: to collect data on the elusive western lowland gorilla, a species teetering on the edge of extinction due to poaching and habitat loss. She worked for a prestigious research company, tasked with a conservation project that blended field observation with cutting-edge DNA analysis to unravel the evolutionary secrets of primates so close to humankind. For Claire, this wasn't just a job. It was an escape. Years of burying herself in work had left her isolated, her personal life a barren wasteland of unanswered questions and unfulfilled desires. The wild, untamed jungle felt like the perfect place to lose herself, or perhaps find something new. The research camp sat like a fragile outpost in the heart of the rainforest, a cluster of canvas tents surrounded by towering trees and the constant hum of uneven life. Equipped with scientific tools, laptops, and a basic CCTV system to monitor wildlife, it was a small but functional base. Claire's team consisted of 3 others, each with their own quirks. Mark, the equipment technician, a rough-around-the-edges guy with a crooked grin and a habit of cracking jokes at the worst times. He handled the cameras and generators, always tinkering with wires like a kid with a new toy. Aisha, the field researcher, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a wealth of experience tracking animals through unforgiving terrain. She moved through the jungle like she was born there. James, the local guard and guide, a quiet man with a rifle slung over his shoulder and a wary gaze that never left the shadows. He knew the forest's dangers, both animal and human, and trusted his instincts more than any map. Inside the camp, the team was already caring for a young gorilla named Kito, a 2-year-old orphan rescued from poachers months earlier. Kito was slated for release back into the wild once the research was complete, but for now, he was their subject. Claire noticed something odd about him from the start. His eyes were unusually large and bright, almost human-like, shimmering with a curiosity that set him apart from the gorillas she'd studied in textbooks. He didn't just glance at the world, he watched it, tilting his head as if trying to understand the humans around him. During feeding time, Kito would sit cross-legged, a posture eerily similar to Claire's when she worked, and mimic her movements, like the way she tapped her pen against her notebook. "It's almost like he's studying us," Claire murmured to herself one evening, scribbling notes under the dim glow of a lantern. She logged his behavior meticulously, the way he reached for objects with deliberate care, the soft grunts he made when she spoke to him, as if responding. Scientifically, it fascinated her. Gorillas were known to recognize faces and show basic emotions, but Kito's actions hinted at something more, something she couldn't quite explain. The first night in the jungle was restless. As Claire unpacked her gear, the sounds of the forest pressed in. The chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves, and a low, rumbling noise she couldn't place, like a distant breath carried on the wind. She chalked it up to exhaustion and the strangeness of her new surroundings, but as she lay in her tent, staring at the canvas ceiling, a shiver ran down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was out there, just beyond the flickering light of the camp, watching her. The days in the Congo rainforest blurred into a rhythm of observation and discovery. Claire spent her mornings trailing Kito's every move, her notebook filling with sketches and data points. She documented how he played with sticks, stacking them like a child with building blocks, or how he'd pause to stare at her when she adjusted the camera lenses. His gaze wasn't vacant like other animals she'd studied. It carried weight, a quiet intensity that made her wonder what he saw in her. "You're a little scientist yourself, aren't you?" she'd whisper, half smiling as Kito tilted his head in response. But it was the nights that began to unsettle her. After the team retired to their tents, Mark snoring loudly, Aisha poring over maps, James keeping watch with his rifle propped nearby, Claire stayed up, hunched over her laptop in the dim light. She analyzed Kito's footage, cross-referencing it with studies on primate behavior. The glow of the screen cast shadows on the tent walls, and the jungle's chorus of sounds filled the silence. Yet beneath the familiar hum, she felt it again, an unshakable sense of being watched. It wasn't the rustle of a bird or the scamper of a monkey. It was heavier, deliberate, like eyes boring into her from the darkness beyond. One night, she couldn't ignore it any longer. Setting her laptop aside, she grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, the beam cutting through the thick air. The camp was still. Mark's snores a distant rumble, the CCTV monitors flickering in the main tent. She scanned the trees, their gnarled branches twisting like frozen shadows, but found nothing. "Get a grip, Claire," she muttered, rubbing her tired eyes. She checked the CCTV footage later with Mark, who shrugged it off. "Just the jungle playing tricks on you," he said, tapping the screen where only leaves swayed in the wind. "Or maybe a big old critter's got a crush on you." His grin made her roll her eyes, but the unease lingered. That night, the dreams began. Claire found herself standing in a clearing, the air thick with mist. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, broad silhouette, its outline blurred but powerful. She couldn't see his face clearly, just the glint of deep, piercing eyes that locked onto hers. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming, yet strangely comforting, like a force of nature drawn to her. Her heart raced as he reached out, his touch grazing her shoulder. A sensation so vivid, she could feel the warmth through her skin. She jolted awake, breathless, her tent bathed in the gray light of pre-dawn. Her pulse pounded in her ears, and for a moment, she swore she heard that low, rumbling breath from the forest again. The dreams returned each night, growing sharper. The figure never spoke, but his gaze held her captive, stirring something deep within, a mix of fear, curiosity, and an unfamiliar pull she couldn't name. She'd wake with her hands trembling, her mind replaying the way his shadow loomed over her, both protector and enigma. During the day, she threw herself into work to shake it off, but Kito's stares didn't help. Once, as she adjusted a motion sensor near his enclosure, he pressed his small hand against the netting, watching her with those uncanny eyes. "What's going on in that head of yours?" she asked softly, half expecting an answer. Mark caught her talking to Kito one evening and chuckled. "You're going to turn him into your lab assistant at this rate. Careful. He might start asking for a paycheck." Claire forced a laugh, but her thoughts drifted back to the dreams. Were they just chess? Her imagination running wild in this untamed place? Or was something in the jungle reaching out to her, tugging at a part of her she'd buried long ago? As she lay in her tent that night, the forest whispering beyond the canvas, she couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was closer than she realized, and far more dangerous than she could imagine. Tôi hiểu bạn muốn giấc mơ trong chương 3 kịch tính và gợi cảm hơn một chút để tăng sự hấp dẫn, nhưng vẫn đảm bảo phù hợp với nguyên tắc YouTube, tránh các chi tiết nhạy cảm hoặc quá rõ ràng. Dưới đây là phiên bản điều chỉnh của chương 3, với giấc mơ được viết lại để trở nên mãnh liệt, quyến rũ hơn, nhưng vẫn tinh tế, tập trung vào cảm xúc, không khí và sự kết nối nguyên thủy, thay vì mô tả chi tiết 18+. Tôi sẽ giữ nguyên các phần khác của chương, chỉ thay đổi đoạn giấc mơ và một số câu liên quan để phù hợp với không khí mới. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Unknown. The jungle was alive with secrets, and Claire felt them pressing closer with each passing day. Her mornings were spent tracking Kito's movements, her afternoons analyzing his behaviors, how he stacked rocks with careful precision, how he mirrored her gestures with an eerie grace. She couldn't deny it anymore. Kito was different. His bright, human-like eyes followed her everywhere, reflecting a spark of understanding she'd never seen in any primate before. It thrilled her as a scientist, but it also gnawed at her, stirring questions she couldn't answer. One sweltering afternoon, while Aisha mapped out a new observation route, Claire noticed something odd near the camp's edge. A massive footprint pressed into the mud, far larger than Kito's or any gorilla she'd studied. The toes splayed wide, the imprint deep, as if carved by something heavy and deliberate. Her pulse quickened. "Aisha, come look at this," she called, kneeling to measure it with her tape. Aisha frowned as she approached. "That's no lowland gorilla. Too big. Maybe an old male we haven't tagged yet?" But Claire wasn't convinced. The print felt off, like a relic of something ancient lurking just out of sight. That evening, she convinced Aisha to trek deeper into the forest, following a faint trail of broken branches and disturbed soil. The air grew thick, the canopy choking out the sunlight until they stumbled upon a hidden cave. Its entrance yawned like a dark mouth, framed by jagged rocks. Inside, Claire's flashlight danced across the walls, revealing crude carvings, etched figures of a towering gorilla standing beside a human, their hands almost touching. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy she couldn't name. She brushed her fingers over the stone, her mind racing. Was this a forgotten legend or something more? Aisha urged her to leave. "This place gives me the creeps." But Claire pocketed a few long black hairs she found on the ground, determined to test their DNA later. Back at camp, her unease deepened. Kito seemed restless, pacing his enclosure and staring into the forest as if waiting for something. When Claire approached, he reached through the netting, his small fingers brushing her wrist. The contact sent a jolt through her, warm and electric, and for a moment she froze, caught in his gaze. "You know more than you're letting on, don't you?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. James, passing by with his rifle, shot her a stern look. "Don't get too attached, Claire. He's not a pet." She nodded, but the connection lingered, tugging at her thoughts. That night, the dreams returned, more vivid, more consuming than ever, pulling her into a realm where the jungle's heartbeat pulsed through her veins. She stood in a clearing, bathed in silvery moonlight, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids. A low hum vibrated around her, like the forest itself was alive, whispering her name. Then he appeared, a towering figure emerging from the shadows, his form both wild and commanding. His silhouette was chiseled against the mist, broad shoulders and muscled arms moving with a grace that belied his size. His eyes burned like twin flames, deep and unyielding, pinning her in place with a gaze that felt like it could unravel her soul. He stepped closer, the ground trembling faintly under his weight, each movement radiating a raw, untamed energy that set her nerves alight. The air between them crackled, heavy with an unmufften pull. Her breath hitched as he stopped just inches away, his presence enveloping her like a storm about to break. Slowly, he raised a hand, his fingers, strong, calloused, yet impossibly gentle, hovering near her face. The heat from his skin brushed against her cheek, a phantom touch that sent a shiver racing down her spine. Her body responded instinctively, leaning toward him, drawn by a force older than reason. In the dream, he tilted his head, studying her as if she were the mystery. His breath, warm and steady, grazed her neck, stirring the loose strands of her hair. The closeness was intoxicating. Her heart pounded, her skin flushed with a warmth that spread through her core. She felt exposed, yet safe. as if he saw every hidden part of her and claimed it as his own. His hand moved lower, tracing the air along her collarbone, never quite touching, but igniting a spark that made her gasp. The jungle seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them in a world of moonlight and shadow, bound by a silent promise that thrummed in her blood. She reached out, her fingers trembling, longing to bridge the gap. When the dream shattered and she woke with a cry, her body tingling, her chest heaving in the stifling air of her tent, Claire clutched the edge of her sleeping bag, the dream's intensity clinging to her like damp heat. Her skin still burned where his imagined touch had lingered, and her mind spun with questions. The cave, Kito's stare, the footprint. They wove a tapestry of mystery she couldn't untangle. She stumbled to her desk, her hands shaking as she scrawled in her journal. Dreams escalating, linked to the forest, hallucination, or a signal. Outside, the jungle hummed, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she heard that low, resonant breath again, beckoning her into its depths. The days stretched on, each one heavier with the weight of the unknown. Claire buried herself in her work, testing the black hairs from the cave, only to find the DNA results inconclusive, a jumble of markers that didn't match any known gorilla species. It should have excited her, but instead, it left her restless. Kito's presence didn't help. He'd taken to sitting as close to her as the enclosure allowed, his small hands gripping the netting whenever she passed. His eyes, those unnervingly bright, human-like eyes, followed her every move, as if he sensed the turmoil brewing inside her. She couldn't look at him without feeling the echo of her dreams, that shadowy figure haunting her every quiet moment. The team had settled into a fragile routine, but the forest refused to let them rest. One morning, Aisha proposed a trip deeper into the jungle to collect plant samples, part of their study on how the gorilla's diet shaped their behavior. "We need to know what Kito's kind thrives on out here," she said, slinging a backpack over her shoulder. Claire agreed, eager for a distraction, and the group set out. Aisha leading the way, Claire with her notebook, Mark grumbling about the heat, and James trailing behind, his rifle at the ready. They'd gone a few kilometers when Claire veered off to examine a cluster of fruit trees, their branches heavy with ripe berries Kito might eat. She was scribbling notes when the air shifted, a sudden stillness, the birds falling silent. Before she could call out, rough hands grabbed her from behind. She thrashed, dropping her notebook as a burlap sack was yanked over her head. Voices barked in a language she didn't understand, and the sharp sting of a rope bit into her wrists. Poachers. Her scream was cut short by a blow to her stomach, and the world spun as she was dragged through the undergrowth. She heard Aisha shout in the distance, then the crack of James's rifle, but it was too late. The forest swallowed her. When Claire came to, the sack was gone and she was slumped against a tree in a makeshift camp. A crude circle of tents and crates, the air thick with the stench of sweat and gunpowder. Her hands were bound, her head throbbing. 3 men loomed nearby, their faces weathered and hard, rifles slung over their shoulders. One, a wiry man with a scar across his cheek, crouched in front of her, his grin revealing yellowed teeth. "Pretty scientist," he sneered in broken English. "You got that weird little gorilla, huh? Worth a fortune on the market." Claire's stomach churned. They were after Kito. She glared at him, refusing to speak, but fear coiled tight in her chest as he laughed and walked away. Hours crawled by, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the camp. Claire tugged at her ropes, her wrists raw, her mind racing for a way out. The poachers were distracted, arguing over a map, when a sound broke the tension. A deep, guttural roar that shook the trees. The men froze, grabbing their weapons, but before they could react, a shadow exploded from the jungle. It was massive, a blur of black fur and muscle, towering over them at nearly 8 feet tall. Its eyes blazed like torches in the dusk, and with a single swipe, It sent the scar-faced man crashing into a crate, splintering it to pieces. Claire's breath caught as the creature turned toward her. It was a gorilla, bigger than any she'd ever seen, its body a fortress of strength, its fur gleaming like midnight. The poachers fired wildly, bullets tearing through leaves, but the beast moved like a tempest, smashing their guns and scattering them into the trees. One man lunged at it with a machete. The gorilla caught his arm mid-swing, hurling him aside with a roar that echoed through the forest. In minutes, the camp was a wreck. The poachers fleeing or lying unconscious in the dirt. Silence fell, broken only by the creature's heavy breathing. It turned to Claire, its gaze locking onto hers, and she froze. Those eyes, they were the same ones from her dreams, fierce yet knowing, burning with an intelligence that sent a shiver through her. It stepped closer, its massive hand reaching down, and with a gentleness that defied its size, it snapped the ropes around her wrists. She stumbled to her feet, her legs shaky, staring up at it in awe. "You," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The gorilla tilted its head as if recognizing her, then let out a low grunt, a sound that felt like a promise, a tether between them. Before she could say more, it turned and vanished into the trees, leaving her alone amid the wreckage. Claire sank to her knees, her heart pounding, the memory of its eyes searing into her mind. She didn't know what it was, a guardian, a myth, or something tied to Kito. But one thing was certain, it had saved her, and in that moment, the jungle felt alive with a presence she could no longer deny. Claire stood trembling in the ruined poachers' camp, the air thick with the scent of crushed leaves and gunpowder. Her wrists stung where the ropes had bitten into her skin, but her mind was elsewhere, fixed on the towering gorilla that had vanished into the jungle. Its eyes lingered in her thoughts, those blazing, soul-piercing eyes from her dreams, now undeniably real. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying her ragged breaths. Whatever it was, it had risked itself to save her, and that truth pulsed through her like a second heartbeat. She didn't have long to process it. A rustling in the trees snapped her back to the present, and moments later, Aisha burst into the clearing, her face streaked with sweat and dirt. "Claire! Thank God you're alive!" she gasped, rushing over with James close behind, his rifle still smoking. Mark trailed last, panting and wide-eyed. "What the hell happened here?" he demanded, kicking at a shattered crate. Claire hesitated, her gaze drifting to the shadows where the gorilla had disappeared. "Something attacked them," she said carefully. "It saved me." Aisha frowned, scanning the wreckage. "Something big, by the looks of it. We heard the roars, thought we'd lost you." James said nothing, his eyes narrowing as he studied the ground, but he didn't press her. The team urged her to head back to camp, but Claire shook her head. "Not yet. I need to know what's out here." Before they could argue, she grabbed her flashlight and followed the faint trail the gorilla had left, broken branches and deep prints leading deeper into the forest. Aisha protested, but Claire's resolve was ironclad. 5 minutes, she promised, though she wasn't sure she'd keep it. The others reluctantly stayed behind, watching her vanish into the trees. The trail led her to a hidden grove, where a narrow stream shimmered under a canopy, pierced by an unearthly moonlight. The air was dense, saturated with the musk of wet earth and a wild, intoxicating scent that clung to her skin. Shadows writhed across the trees, their forms bending and stretching like phantoms caught in a timeless dance. A low, resonant hum pulsed through the ground, vibrating up her legs, as if the jungle itself were alive, drawing her in with a seductive whisper. Claire's flashlight flickered and died, leaving her bathed in the silver glow, her senses sharpened to every rustle, every breath of wind. Then she saw it, the gorilla, rising from the mist by the water's edge, its massive form a monument of power etched against the night. It turned, its eyes locking onto hers, twin flames that burned through the darkness and seared into her soul. Her breath hitched, her body rooted yet trembling as she stepped closer, drawn by a force older than reason. "You're the one," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread in the charged air. "The one from my dreams." The gorilla's gaze deepened, a silent answer that sent a jolt of heat racing through her veins. A sensation unfurled in her mind, raw and unshakable, like a voice carved from the wild. "You kept him safe. Now I keep you." It wasn't just a thought. It was a claim, sinking deep into her core, binding her to this moment. She thought of Kito, his uncanny eyes and quiet trust, and knew this creature was linked to him, a guardian, a shadow born of the forest's heart. But there was Pa. As the gorilla stepped closer, its eyes flickered with something ancient, a recognition that went beyond Kito. Another whisper brushed her mind, faint yet piercing. "You carry the mark, the one I've waited for." Her heart skipped. A mark? She didn't understand, but a memory flashed. Her grandmother's stories of an ancestor lost to the wild, a woman said to have danced with spirits in a jungle far away. Could it be? The gorilla advanced, its steps a slow, deliberate quake that rippled through the earth and up her spine. It stopped so close she could feel the heat rolling off its body, a wall of muscle and fur that towered over her, its breath a warm gust that grazed her face and tangled in her hair. Her heart thundered, a primal rhythm syncing with the jungle's pulse, and she tilted her head back, meeting its gaze. Up close, it was a force of nature, sleek fur glistening in the moonlight, a scent of raw earth and strength that flooded her senses and set her nerves ablaze. She should have been afraid, but instead she felt alive, every inch of her awakened by its nearness. It raised a hand, massive and steady, letting it linger just above her cheek. The air between them crackled, thick with a tension that stole her breath. The heat from its skin brushed her face, a whisper of contact that sent a shiver cascading down her body, igniting a fire in her chest. Her lips parted, a soft sound escaping as she leaned into the sensation, her skin flushing with a warmth that spread like wildfire. The gorilla's eyes narrowed, fierce yet possessive, as if it could see the hidden desires she'd buried deep. Desires now stirring, clawing to the surface in this forbidden grove. Its hand moved, tracing the air along her jaw, then lower, hovering near the curve of her neck, where her pulse raced beneath her skin. The nearness was electric, a magnetic pull that made her sway forward, her body yearning to close the gap. She felt it then, a surge of something ancient within her, a spark that mirrored the gorilla's wild essence, as if her blood remembered a bond forged long ago. Its gaze deepened, drinking her in, and she wondered if it saw her not just as Kito's keeper, but as a piece of its world, a soul marked by fate to stand here in this grove, under its watchful eye. The air thickened, the moonlight bending around them like a shroud, and for a fleeting moment, the world dissolved, leaving only the two of them, locked in a dance of shadow and longing. Her fingers twitched, reaching out to graze the edge of its form, the air between them humming with a primal energy that pulsed through her blood. The gorilla let out a low, resonant growl, a sound that vibrated through her, sinking into her bones and leaving her trembling with its echo. Then, as if sensing the boundary they teetered on, it stepped back, its eyes holding hers with a final, searing intensity. It turned and melted into the mist, vanishing as silently as it had come, leaving the grove steeped in silence. Claire sank to her knees by the stream, her hands pressed to the earth, her body still thrumming with the aftermath of its presence. She felt changed, marked by a force she couldn't name, a wild, untamed secret that burned within her, tied to a legacy she'd only begun to grasp. Aisha's voice pierced the stillness, calling her back. Claire rose, casting a lingering glance at the grove before rejoining the team. She didn't speak of the encounter, not yet. Some truths were too raw, too intoxicating to share. As they trekked back to camp, the jungle watched her, its whispers curling around her like a memory she'd never shake. The trek back to camp was a blur, the jungle's whispers trailing Claire like a shadow she couldn't shake. Her team surrounded her, Aisha asking questions, Mark cracking nervous jokes, James scanning the trees with his rifle. But she barely heard them. Her body still hummed from the encounter in the grove, the gorilla's searing gaze and the echo of its voice burned into her mind. You kept him safe. Now I keep you. And then that second, cryptic whisper. You carry the mark, the one I've waited for. Her fingers brushed her neck where its heat had lingered, and she wondered what it had seen in her, what part of her soul bore this mysterious mark. Back at the camp, the team buzzed with plans to pack up and leave. The poacher attack had rattled them, and Aisha insisted it was too dangerous to stay. We've got enough data, she said, her voice firm. Kito's ready to go back to the wild, and we need to report this. Claire nodded absently, her eyes drifting to the little gorilla in his enclosure. Kito sat quietly, his bright gaze fixed on her, as if he knew their time together was ending. She approached him, kneeling by the netting. You're going home soon, she murmured, her throat tight. He reached out, his small hand brushing hers, and she felt that same jolt, warm, familiar, a thread tying her to the jungle's heart. The next morning, they released Kito. James led them to a clearing near the forest's edge, where the trees opened to a sea of green. Claire unlatched the crate, and Kito stepped out, hesitating as he looked back at her. His eyes, those uncanny, human-like eyes, held hers for a long moment, a silent farewell that pierced her chest. Then he turned and bounded into the trees, his small form swallowed by the wilderness. She watched until he was gone, a strange ache settling in her bones. He'll be okay, Aisha said, resting a hand on her shoulder. Claire managed a smile, but her thoughts were elsewhere, on the gorilla that had saved her, and the legacy it had hinted at. The team left the Congo the following day, the plane's engines drowning out the jungle's hum as they lifted into the sky. Claire pressed her forehead to the window, staring down at the endless canopy below. Somewhere in that green abyss, the gorilla roamed, a guardian of secrets older than time. She thought of the cave carvings, the stories her grandmother once told of an ancestor who vanished into the wild, a woman said to have walked with spirits. Had that blood flowed into her, marking her as part of this untamed world? The idea felt less like a question now, and more like a truth she'd always carried, waiting to awaken. Back in the States, Claire sat in her sterile office, the hum of fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the jungle's song. The black hairs from the cave lay sealed in a vial on her desk, their DNA still a mystery she hadn't shared with her company. The fossil fragments she'd found by the stream sat beside them, whispering of a lost lineage, a bridge between human and wild that science might never fully grasp. She opened her journal, flipping to the last page where she'd scribbled after the grove. A mark, a bond, a call I can't ignore. She closed it with a sigh, her gaze drifting to the window. Outside, the city sprawled, gray and unyielding, but a faint breeze slipped through the crack, carrying the scent of rain, wild, alive, calling her back. Months later, Claire stood before a lecture hall, presenting her findings on the western lowland gorilla. She spoke of their intelligence, their fragile ecosystems, the need to protect them, but she left out the grove, the gorilla, the mark. Those were hers alone, a secret too vast to fit into slides and statistics. As the audience applauded, a student raised a hand. "What's the most important thing you learned out there?" he asked. Claire paused, her mind flashing to the gorilla's eyes, Kito's touch, the jungle's embrace. That we're not as separate from the wild as we think, she said softly. It's in us, waiting to be remembered. That night, she dreamed again, not of the towering figure, but of the jungle itself, its heartbeat syncing with hers. She woke with a smile, a quiet resolve taking root. She'd return one day, not as a scientist chasing data, but as someone seeking the wild within, a woman marked by a bond that transcended time, a legacy of strength and wonder. The jungle had taught her that true connection wasn't just about saving others. It was about finding yourself in the untamed spaces between. And somewhere, deep in the Congo, a gorilla stood on a ridge, its eyes scanning the horizon. It let out a low, resonant call, a sound that carried on the wind, a promise kept, a mark honored, a secret alive in the wild forever. Thank you for stepping into the jungle secret with me. If this story stirred something in you, whether it's awe, curiosity, or your own wild thoughts, drop them in the comments below. What did you think of Claire's journey? Did the gorilla's mystery captivate you? Or do you believe we all have a mark of the wild inside us? I'd love to hear your take. Let's keep the conversation alive. Don't forget to like if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more tales like this, and hit that bell so you're ready for whatever adventure comes next. Until then, stay curious, stay wild. See you in the comments.